I remember the vulnerability of standing in one place and having 4 dudes basically kick and punch me until I was sobbing and I couldn't breathe. So I would get over the fear of being hit again. And so that I could practice keeping calm and not having that freeze or flight response that my fight would actually kick in. And I had to really dig deep and take those deep breaths and go, is this for me? Can I do this? Can I mentally figure out my feelings enough to actually accomplish this fight camp, actually accomplish regionals and provincials and nationals and be able to fight this much to the pinnacle of what I wanted and what I thought I could work my way towards. Welcome back to Beyond the Black Belts podcast. I'm Megan Cotterill, and I'm the owner and founder of 5 Elements Martial Arts in Calgary, and I am the WKU Team Canada president. So today, we're going to talk about life lessons I learned in fight camp. I want to talk about this a lot, so this is only going to be part 1 of this topic. I've been in fight camps for 10 years straight, and a bit more throughout my career of 30 plus years. But there was an intense time of 10 years where it was the ups and downs and the pros and cons, the good, the bad, the ugly, the bloody, the tears, the throwing up, the peeing pants, all of the things. And so today we're going to dive in. If you like this podcast, please like, share, follow anywhere you can find the podcast, plus on YouTube and Instagram at Beyond the Black Belts. So there's a famous quote that says, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. I'm sure we've all heard this quite often, and it's pretty true. So fight camps, you always have optimistic thoughts and you're super excited and you've totally chosen your goal and you figured out what you want to do and you're brave enough to go and do it. So in my industry, it was starting with local competitions, going into regional, provincial championships, national qualifiers, all the way to the world championships. So I never really got into serious fight camps until I was in my 30s. So my heaviest competition years were in my 30s. My 20s were building my business and getting higher degrees and more black belts and getting more knowledge and having a baby. So after I had my son, I decided that I wanted to be a multiple time world champion. Actually, my number was 10. And that was what I was going to pursue doing as hard as I possibly can, as focused as I can. But I learned a lot of life lessons through those fight camps because they often lasted almost a year. So they would start at the end of one world championships. I'd have maybe a couple weeks off, maybe 6 to 7 weeks max. And then starting in January, it'd be another 10, 11-month fight camp where I'd have goals every week. I'd figure out what I wanted to do. I'd set the tone. I'd organize my schedule. I'd get my diet ready to go, knew what my training plan was going to be, and then I would just execute. What I want to talk about today was part of that was a lot of emotional ups and downs, as well as the physical ups and downs, psychological, mental. It was full spectrum of all the feelings all the time. And I used to say, especially after really, really brutal training sessions or brutal days, I would rather get kicked in the face than get kicked in the feelings. So I don't know if that resonates with anybody else, but I found that the physical pain and the physicality of the fight camp was so much easier than the ups and downs of my emotions and what I psychologically, mentally, emotionally went throughout the entire process. So the first piece was being vulnerable to decide to even fight. And when you step into that ring, it's not natural. It's not normal. You don't wake up in the morning as a human being and decide that you're going to do a fight training camp. Most humans don't do that. I think martial artists are kind of crazy in that respect because we choose to go into battle. We choose to physically punch and kick other people and then have that being done to us. We physically think about knocking someone else out, but that's going to happen to us. We think about scoring and hitting people in the ribs and the legs and the face and the jaw and the temple, but that also is going to happen to us as well. So as much as we're pursuing all the combativeness of it, we're also pursuing all the defensiveness of it as well. And coming to terms with the fact that I had to be vulnerable and I had to take all that risk, and I was going to get punched and kicked in the face and punched and kicked in the head. And this was as a new mom. I first started my training camp at 3 weeks after my son was born. So I was 30 years old, 3 weeks later, serious postpartum. And I remember the vulnerability of standing in one place and having 4 dudes basically kick and punch me until I was sobbing and I couldn't breathe. So I would get over the fear of being hit again. And so that I could practice keeping calm and not having that freeze or flight response, that my fight would actually kick in, and that my feelings of being overwhelmed and my feelings of being terrified and my feelings of not being able to defend myself and the feelings of my baby's mom not being okay and not being able to live or work through this, I sobbed. I felt vulnerable. I was overwhelmed. I was getting kicked and punched in the feelings like crazy, and I couldn't move and I couldn't do anything about it. And I had to really dig deep and take those deep breaths and go, is this for me? Can I do this? Can I mentally figure out my feelings enough to actually accomplish this fight camp, actually accomplish regionals and provincials and nationals, and be able to fight this much to the pinnacle of what I wanted and what I thought I could work my way towards. So standing in one square of my mats while people punched and kicked me incessantly for round after round after round after round, and all I could do was stand there and take it, I learned what I was made of. I learned that if I controlled my breathing, controlled my emotional regulation, and I learned to realize that I was okay and I could defend myself and I could fight back, that was the key to me being successful when I actually went to competition, because no girl was going to stand there, or not even 4 girls were going to stand there and beat the snot out of me from all corners incessantly. I'd be able to fight back. I know what to be able to do. I would have that little trigger in me or that light switch to be able to say, I'm actually okay. I'm not as overwhelmed as I think. I'm not as anxious as I think. I'm not as frustrated as I think. And it's go time. I can punch back. I can hit back. I can move. I can think about my game plan. I can look for those openings. I can move forward. I could do this. And it was incredible to realize that these getting kicked in the feelings, I could overcome this. Anyone can overcome this. You can face those fears and realize that who you are is actually incredible, like a total warrior, a total beast. So there was a ton of emotional processing. I felt like it was therapy. I felt like I could go to a therapist and talk about the fact that I was anxious or overwhelmed or scared or panicky or felt like I wasn't talented enough, or I could actually stand in training camp with my training partners or on my heavy bag and go, why do I feel overwhelmed? How do I process being overwhelmed? What is my game plan to feeling overwhelmed? Okay, I'm overwhelmed because I don't think I can move fast enough. Okay, what's my game plan? How do I figure out how to move fast enough? Okay, well, I'm going to set 5 things, footwork or skipping rope more or going for jogs. And that game planning helped take away that overwhelming feeling. And then the next feeling that I had to emotionally process was, I'm terrified. What if I get knocked out? What if I'm permanently injured? What is my game plan? How do I process that? What's my list? Okay, well, I need to guard myself better. I need to work on being on the edge of the ring or up against the cage. And I need to learn to defend myself and block and guard and self-protect way more, and then problem solve and look for openings, figure out a game plan to be able to figure out side movement or use my legs more while protecting my head. So my physical game plan was helping me to emotionally process when I felt like I was in danger or I felt like I wasn't going to be okay. And those were incredible life lessons for me, because they've helped me again in my real life. when I've been absolutely terrified to speak in front of people or go to court or speak at a charity event about something, really overwhelming that I had to deal with, I had to think, okay, how did I use my fight camp and all those emotions and all those negative emotions and then come up with a physical game plan that I could actually see to take back control of all of that and be able to go, it's not going to win. I'm going to win. My game plan is going to win. My practical lists are going to win. Like, I can achieve what I want to achieve by taking the emotional and turning it into something physical. If you like this podcast and you like this topic, I would love it if you commented, shared, or liked. Through the roller coaster of the emotional toll of the physical experience that I was having in this fight camp, there was days when I trained for 8 hours. There was days I didn't sleep so well. There was days when I was starving and trying to think about my weight class. And then I still had to feed my son and take care of him and put him to bed and make sure he was okay. And I had to figure out my ways of staying strong for that. I had to stay strong for myself. I had to stay strong for my business. I had to stay very strong for my son. And I had to stay really strong for my goals, especially on days where I felt like I had nothing left to give. My bucket was super, super, super empty. And I felt like my emotions were too much. They got too dark and too sad. And I had to think about how to balance everything and how to give myself some perspective on what I was actually going through and how unnatural this was and how extreme this was and how aggressive this was and how this isn't something that people go through normally with this much intensity, but how can I apply this and how can I learn and become better in business or life or in relationships? And so I learned to figure out the balance of what I was emotionally going through and then physically how to handle it. So on days when I was going through fight camps and I felt really depressed or anxious, or I was having flashbacks of previous traumas, or I was going through postpartum, I had a year of postpartum while I was in fight camp, in my very first fight camp after having my son, is it helped me emotionally to focus on those small steps and actually use my physicality to my advantage. You have no idea how much dopamine you can get when you're cranking some super loud Euro dance and you're punching a target until your arms can't move. You're kicking a target till your arms can't move. You have cramps in your stomach and you start to cry. I physically would tire myself out so that I could cry and release and emotionally process what I was going through. And learning to use my physicality as a way of processing those emotions, or at least having an outlet or some sort of relief on what I was trying to deal with, was amazing. And I still continue to do that to this day. When I have something that I'm really terrified about or something that I'm really overwhelmed and scared about and feel like I can't deal with, I will go to the gym. I will go to the studio. I will put my hand wraps and gloves on. I will run and do footwork and hit the heavy bag and shadow box and go through forms until my body can go through all the physical pieces that it needs to, so I can regulate my emotions and problem solve again in the best way I possibly can, and try to regulate those emotions in a way where I'm proud of the outcome and I feel strong enough to deal with the outcome, and I feel like I'm strong enough to face the fight of the day. So every day doesn't have to be a fight. Every day doesn't have to be the emotional ups and downs or the physical ups and downs that I faced in a fight camp. But at least I learned a lot of emotional tools within that fight camp of what I was able to overcome and how I was able to focus and how I was able to self-regulate. And those same tools that I had in my toolbox from this to give me the outcomes that I was so proud of, I continue to use every day. If you like the topic and this podcast, please comment below, like, and share. Thank you for listening, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.